Campaign finance reform is what it pretends to combat: corruption. Let me say that again, slightly rephrased. Campaign finance reform corrupts the political system it presumes to save from corruption. Now that I've taken the trouble to repeat myself, you may be shaking your head, wondering how I could be so wrong. Don't we want to get money out of politics? Isn't campaign finance reform an inherent good? The late Senator Eugene McCarthy, the iconic liberal politician of the Vietnam War era, didn't think so. McCarthy, a Democrat who represented Minnesota in the Senate from 1959 to 1971, did something unthinkable in 1968. Because of his opposition to the Vietnam War, he challenged a powerful incumbent president for his party's presidential nomination. His challenge to President Lyndon Johnson was possible and potent only because 5 wealthy liberals who shared McCarthy's opposition to the Vietnam War gave him substantial sums of money. Stuart Mott's $210,000 would be $1.4 million in today's dollars. The 5 donors' seed money enabled McCarthy to raise $11 million, or $75 million today. But because of campaign finance reform, the most a wealthy quintet could give to help an insurgent against an incumbent today would be $13,000, 5 times the individual limit of $2,600. McCarthy didn't win the nomination.
He claims that the most that those guys could give today is $13,000. Keep in mind that he doesn't mention PACs, doesn't mention the fact that you can have corporations and special interest groups that literally raise unlimited amounts of money in today's political system that they then use to run all kinds of negative campaign ads and influence our elections. He makes it seem as if those 5 individuals today could only give $13,000 when in reality powerful individuals are able to form together, create PACs, and they're able to raise millions upon millions of dollars.
For a second term. In doing so, McCarthy changed history. But the Democratic Party establishment wasn't happy about it. To stop it from happening again, they pushed for government regulation of political speech. Thus, in reaction to Eugene McCarthy's insurgency, campaign finance reform was...
This guy and the folks at Prager didn't even do their basic research. This is a basic undergraduate political science book from a campaigns and elections course, and it highlights that in 1907, the Tillman Act was passed, and this was to limit the donations that corporations could give to political campaigns. You later had the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947, and this made it so that you had to have labor unions basically restricted in the amounts that they could give, and then you started having the formation of PACs. This guy didn't do his research. The people at Prager University didn't double check him. And so for him to say that campaign finance reform was born at the time that McCarthy tried to run against Lyndon B. Johnson and the Democratic establishment was upset about it, that's not factually accurate. There were attempts of campaign finance reform long before that election.
Born. Not much has changed since then. Whatever their stated intentions, campaign finance laws are not written to protect the public from corrupt politicians. They are written to protect incumbents from anyone who might challenge them. So, not only doesn't campaign finance reform disrupt the status quo, it encases it in cement. All the laws that ever have regulated campaigns or ever will regulate them have had or will have one thing in common. They have been or will be written by incumbent legislators. That is why such laws are presumptively disreputable and usually unconstitutional. But, reformers shout, politicians are bought and sold by big money interests, and we have to stop this. These reformers argue 2 propositions. One is that corruption is so pervasive and so subtle that it is invisible. They resemble the zealots who say proof of the conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy is the fact that no proof has been found. Alternatively, reformers argue that corruption is entirely visible everywhere. If politician A votes in a way that pleases contributor B, particularly if contributor B enjoyed access to politician A, that shall be designated corruption. But there is abundant research demonstrating that money almost always moves toward the politician with whom the contributor already agrees. In other words, money is rarely given in order to change a politician's votes. It is given in order to support politicians who already vote the way donors want them to.
Him comparing people that believe that there can be corruption when individuals and corporations are funding politicians' campaigns, him likening them to a conspiracy theorist is one of the wildest things I've ever heard of. There are plenty of documented instances of politicians changing their stance once they're meeting with specific donors. So for example, when Mitt Romney was running for president in 2012, at one point he'd been saying climate change was a serious problem. Then it was documented that he was going to some of the Koch brothers donor summits. He was meeting with them, then all of a sudden he changes his tune and starts saying that climate change isn't a problem. At the Republican National Committee, he's mocking Obama for believing in climate change. There are examples of people like Marco Rubio, who had previously said that climate change is a problem, but then as he is receiving money from large oil companies, he changed his views. Even Mike Lee, the fact that he's getting up and making fun of the Green New Deal, I mean, a lot of people may not agree with the Green New Deal, but he's claiming that the real answer is to have babies. And you look, and the oil and gas companies are some of his biggest political contributors. This isn't a coincidence.
That regulating the timing, amount, and content of political advocacy is necessary to improve the tone of politics. These reformers apparently think that what James Madison, the author of the Bill of Rights, meant when he wrote, "Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech," was really, Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech unless incumbents think abridgments will help keep them in office. Even if it were Congress's business to decide that there is too much money in politics, what does too much mean? In the 2007-2008 election cycle, spending in all campaigns, from city council members up to the presidency, was $8.6 billion, about what Americans spend annually on potato chips. Reformers say that regulation of campaign giving and spending will not only spare our leaders the distraction of the governed, that is, seeking undue influence on government, it also will make us think better of government. But a jaundiced view of government is often sensible, and certainly it is justified by all these campaign regulations, which have become a particularly virulent form of the disease it purports to cure. So, let me repeat myself a third and final time. Campaign finance reform is what it pretends to combat: corruption. I'm George Will for Prager University.
Claiming that campaign finance reform is going to lead to more corruption than the system that we have today seems like a stretch of an argument. It's funny that he doesn't bring up the Koch brothers. He doesn't bring up the fact they have these donor summits in which they raise millions upon millions of dollars. If we have a system in which the wealthiest individuals, especially those born into wealth, those that inherit a lot of money, they're able to fund political campaigns and influence the laws being written, we're going to have more of an oligarchy than anything else. It's funny that he doesn't bring up the DeVos family. He doesn't bring up the fact that Betsy DeVos, even though she had no education experience, she was thrown in as the Secretary of Education. You think that that's a coincidence when her family has donated millions upon millions of dollars to the Republican Party? These things aren't coincidences, and he makes it appear as if the Koch brothers and those that are giving money in our political system, that they are some kind of like martyrs or heroes, that they're doing the right thing and standing up to the government, and that it's really just political expression. If money is free speech, then does that mean that some people should have more speech from birth than other individuals? If we believe in the Constitution and that all men are created equal, the Declaration of Independence states, then wouldn't that mean that they should also have an equal voice in government?